Hi, my name is John Kolko and I'm a partner at Modernist Studio. Modernist Studio is a strategy company, but we don't just do strategy projects. We actually teach our customers and clients how to do the work themselves. And you're going to be learning the exact same content that we teach our large corporate clients how to do. Today we're going to focus on service design, and as a result of this course, you're going to learn how to craft great service experiences. Let's get started with an introduction to service design. I want you to think about the last time you were at Starbucks. And chances are, when most of us think about Starbucks, we think about a cup of coffee. The last time I went there, I like to get the short coffee. It's not a small, it's a short. And when I think about the coffee there, I think about the aroma, I think about the cup, I think about the sort of flavor that it looks like. It almost has like a sense about it when you look at the coffee itself that matches and mirrors the way that you feel when you drink it. Think a little bit more about the culture and the community and the experience you had, and paying attention to the actual environment. Chances are your Starbucks that you went to looked a little bit like this: wood paneling, the outside seating area, the metal chairs, big logo, very clean font. And these things start to impact the way you feel about your experience. And then dive a little closer into the experience and think about the interactions you had with the barista. Chances are they asked you what you wanted, they repeated it back to you, maybe they translated your large coffee into a venti, so they were using their language, and you had sort of an end-to-end story unfold in front of you. And when you think about all of those pieces working together, the coffee itself, the environment, the people, the actual product, all of that makes up a service. Service design is the choreography of interactions we have with a system, and typically that system is a brand. One of the keys of service design are service design touch points. These are the things and pressures on people that define and shape the experiences they have. Touch points take a whole number of different forms. We've looked at a couple just briefly. People, we talked about environment, we talked about the coffee itself. There's also digital artifacts, and there's things like policies and procedures, or the invisible things that start to influence the way that we interact with the company. Touch points are going to be the first view that we have into a service. The next is going to be this idea of time. Services take place and they emerge over time, and you can think about the behavior that you have with the service as what's called emergent. It evolves over a sequence of events and a variety of interactions that you have. And each one of those interactions that you have then in turn shapes the service itself. And so that time-based, as things evolve over time, relates closely to the way that you feel about a service. The third big pillar or big rock of a service is going to be around narrative. And these are going to be the stories of how people can achieve their goals, and as a result of those stories, how they feel about the experience they had. Starbucks has a very particular feeling. When I say the word, you think of the storyline that goes with the service of Starbucks, but typically it's intuitive. We don't actually spend the time to say, now what is this experience going to be like? Instead, the narrative unfolds in front of you, and in many ways it's predictable because that narrative has happened many of the other times that you've gone to Starbucks. There's continuity to that. And then finally, we can talk about value. And value is the most important part of the entire choreography of interactions we have with that system. Value is the benefit that we provide to our customers. Value is going to be the way that we understand if we've succeeded. And value is an exchange. And so the customer is going to give us something. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's their time, and we're going to give them something. And usually that something has emotional resonance to it. And so as we look through this, what we're calling a service stairway, you can start to see how these things build on one another. And you can see here the different methods that you're going to learn as a result of taking this course. First, you're going to learn something called service slices, which are a way of thinking about touch points. Then we're going to learn customer journey mapping, which is a way of taking those touch points and applying them over time. We're going to talk about narrative in the context of storyboards and scenarios. And ultimately, all of this leads to value. And the most important part of this is the value promise. The value promise is going to be what we offer to our customers for that value exchange. Let's take a look at an example a little bit more thoroughly than Starbucks. Think about Walt Disney. And I bet many of you have actually gone to Disney World. I spent some time there when I was a kid. And when we think of Disney, we think of things like this. We think of the Magic Kingdom. And it's interesting that the word magic is in the name because it creates a sense of wonderment. Look at the architecture here, the lighting, the way that this creates something coming to life. It's almost like it has an essence of itself that transcends me as the visitor. And we think of the attractions, right? This is Splash Mountain. You get wet when you go down the roller coaster. Think about all of the detail, decorative elements that go into making this experience feel a certain way. Recently, Disney rolled out the Magic Band, which is a unique way that you can do things like get into your hotel room without a key. You can store things like your personal information on it. And most importantly, you can use it to buy things like photographs of yourself going down Splash Mountain, maybe raising your arms up in the air with excitement. And so all of these things start to shape the way that we feel about Disney. And I think one of the things we feel is a sense of nostalgia. This sculpture, I think, exemplifies it to some degree, that we've immortalized Walt Disney because he was a visionary. And the characters have come to life. I love this sculpture because it's this merging, this connectivity of the innovator themselves and the thing they made. And there's something really beautiful about it. There's something really beautiful about this too. That's me when I was 7, and that's Eeyore. And I'm not sure which of us looks more uncomfortable there. But you know, I have memories of this too. I remember what it was like for my visit to Disney. I remember the highs and lows. I remember enjoying the rides. I remember having, you know, a meltdown, because you do when you're 7, you know, sort of over-energized, underslept, eating too much sugar. I have memories about the brand, about the experiences, and about the service that was provided to me. We don't always see all of the service, though. There's something going on at Disney World that's literally happening behind the scenes and underground. These are some of the tunnels that connect all of the different rides where the cast members walk so that they're never seen outside in the theme park doing things that are out of character. You never actually see them going and coming. Instead, they're just sort of there. And this underground system actually supports the service that we see as part of the magic. These are some examples of what happens at night, or when a ride is old, the ride is put to sleep. And again, you never get to see the rides in this way because it breaks the magic continuity that we have with that brand, and it ruins the service experience that we have. And this is probably the biggest no-no of all. You never get to see the characters out of character. This idea of seeing the character with no head, a headless Mickey Mouse, is total taboo. The cast members are required to keep in character every time that they're out in the park. And so when we think about Walt Disney World, we think about these ideas, this idea of touch points, of time, of narrative, and of value. I want to zoom into the idea of touch points. There's a number of varieties of touch points that are important, and we'll cover this as we progress through the course. There's ideas like people and environments. We saw some of that in Disney, the people being the cast members and the environment being the actual space, like Splash Mountain or the Magic Kingdom. Processes and policies, these are some of the invisible things that characterize the experience we're going to have. Physical artifacts and digital artifacts, and these are typically the touch points that we're most intimate with and that we're most familiar with. We have the idea of time, and time takes place invisibly, which makes it difficult to talk about. But pacing plays a big role in the Disney experience. Think about the way that the park is organized, is physically laid out, so that we have sort of a sense of, I see this first, I see this second. It's almost like a grocery store has been designed in a certain way so that we interact in a sequence, so that we're engaged in a variety of connection points. When we're talking about narrative, we're really talking about plot. And this is really, really important at Disney because all of the characters have a backstory to them. Each character we've interacted with in the past through things like television, through things like games, the plush toys that we have. And so we've formed an understanding of what that narrative is, and it needs to be continuous through the entire service experience. It needs to remain in connection with what we remember and the nostalgia we have about our own experiences. And finally, most importantly, we have value. We have the idea of benefit, satisfaction, and reward. And ultimately, that is the most important thing that we can take away from a service experience. For Disney, their value promise is that you will have the most magical experience of your life. When you interact with that brand, you will have magic come to life. And so we can see how all of these things, this idea of touch points, of time, of narrative, and of value, all build in order to support that Walt Disney World experience. Let's juxtapose that, compare and contrast that with another brand, the brand Blackboard. I was recently the vice president of design at Blackboard, and when I was hired through an acquisition actually of a startup, my role was to help transform the company from an enterprise software company into something that's more approachable to students. And we did that through the creation of a number of different products. These products, however, don't operate in isolation. The products are part of a larger product ecosystem, which generally we can think of as a service. The first product that I want to just point out quickly is the MyEDU profile, and this is what was at the heart of our acquisition. You can think of this just like LinkedIn, but for college students. It allows them to present and highlight accomplishments that they're proud of. Things like, I got an A in that course, or I'm looking for an internship, or I'm fluent in different languages. And it always makes them look good so that they don't feel silly about not having done as much as maybe their more experienced peers. This is called Job Genie. This was a product vignette that we created right after our acquisition. And this was a way of extending that MyEDU language into new product directions so that we could help students throughout their entire academic journey. As they got closer to job placement junior and senior year, we noticed that students are often without a guide. They don't necessarily know what direction they're headed. And so we created Job Genie as a very simple way to help them identify jobs that might be interesting to them, and then to learn about those firsthand from people who are actually doing that job on a daily basis. The core products that make up the service experience students have with Blackboard start with the LMS, the Learning Management System. This is what it looks like through our redesign over a period of years, where students can come in, they can see all of their coursework, they can participate through discussion boards with their teachers, and they can download their homework, upload their material, and view their grades. And throughout that service experience, they can engage with their classmates and with their professors and teaching assistants through something called Blackboard Collaborate. This is video and audio conferencing built just for an academic experience, so it has features and capabilities that really start to support the service story that's being told to these students. And so we can think of Blackboard as a company that offers products, but we can also think of it as a company that offers a continuous service to students. And if we look back at our model, we have touch points, time, narrative, and value. The touch points that a student is going to have are the mobile apps, the web apps, the school-specific applications, and help and support, the actual Blackboard helpline. When we think about time for Blackboard, we can think about things that happen in a sequence. The idea of selecting your college, applying for that college, enrolling and selecting courses, selecting the major, declaring your major of study, actually taking class, and then the assessment process of how did I do in class and am I prepared for a job or an internship. When we think of the narrative, just like for Disney we had a backstory for the characters, we have a backstory for academia as well. Ideally, that backstory is something that's supportive and enriching, that's educational. We tell ourselves a story that when you go to school, you arrive at the end with more knowledge than when you started. And all of this adds up and leads to a value promise. And the value promise for Blackboard is that we promise to help you succeed in college and get a job. We articulate the value in a very concise way so that you can understand what that service is offering. And once we have that value promise articulated, then we can vet all of the decisions we make along the way. We can say, do the decisions, the products, the opportunities that we're chasing all ratchet back up to that value promise. And so in summary of our introduction, I want to call attention to 4 key points. And these key points we're going to revisit throughout the course. The first is that services are experienced through a variety of touchpoints. So we should design each touchpoint to work in concert with one another. Touchpoints aren't isolated. Typically we think about, well, we made one product and that product team was responsible for it. But the way that we encounter a service is through continuity, and we expect all of the touchpoints to work in harmony with one another. The second key point is that services are experienced over time. So we need to consider how someone's journey changes across the duration of their experience. Time plays a big role in shaping the way that we think about and feel about a service. And so we need to start to think about services expanding and taking place over time rather than taking place in isolation. This changes the way we think about the artifacts that we make in order to design for that service. Next, services are emotional, so we need to craft an experiential story and design for a particular style of emotional reaction. It's not enough just to provide utility to our users and customers. We actually need to provide a narrative of use that's experiential and therefore highly emotional. We want people to feel a certain way as they go through our service. And finally, we have this idea of value. People have expectations of service value, so we need to clearly define and support a value proposition. We need to be articulate in what that value promise and proposition is. We need to make sure that we understand it as a company so that we can offer it successfully to our users. And so, again, we have this model: touch points, time, narrative, and value. And so let's take a very brief side trip to discover what a service designer actually makes, because these things are very sort of amorphous or difficult to get your hands around. They're not always tangible. And so when we think about what a service designer makes, often we arrive at diagrams. When we look at the service stairway, each one of these things have diagrams that can be created about them. Touch points, we might have diagrammatic representations of the things and pressures on people that define how they react to their work and how they engage with their work. The diagrammatic representations of time often show sequence of interactions. They show things emerging. The narrative representations might take the form of stories or flow. And again, that value is going to be captured through a value promise. These are some examples of what the artifacts might look like as you're working through creating services. You can see things like maps and diagrams, stories and storyboards. They don't have to be high fidelity. They can be sketches just like this, sketches that represent how things happen over time. And so ultimately, service design is a choreography of interactions that happens over time. In this course, we're going to learn methods in order to move up that service stairway. And again, we're going to learn about service slices, customer journey mapping, scenarios and storyboarding, and value proposition and value promise. During this course, we're going to ground and anchor learning in a project that you'll do independently. When we're visiting together through video, we're going to use tattooing as a service experience example. You can tell that that's something dear to my heart. But when you're doing this independently through homework, there's homework, nobody told you, did they? We're going to use an example of Penguin Telecom, a fictional telecommunications company. And we've prepared a series of artifacts that will help you get started. And so in order to begin, here's what I'd like you to do first. First, print out all of the artifacts we've included. You'll find a zip file that contains all of the various information. Hopefully you have access to a printer. No need to print in color, don't worry about that. Black and white is just fine. And then find a workspace where you can spread out and work undisturbed. You'll want to be able to pin your work up on the wall, either using tape or push pins, magnets on a magnet board. And you really want a place where you can leave your work up, where nobody's going to come and sort of kick you out of the conference room or take it all down. And then I'd like you to read the project brief so that you understand the project definition and what's expected of you. And while you're doing that, read through all of the artifacts so you understand the raw material you have at your disposal. When we start cranking through the project, I want you to create dedicated blocks of time where you can work on the project in an uninterrupted fashion, because that's the way that we would work if we were doing this professionally. You would want isolated blocks of time where you can really focus. And then finally, think about working on the project collaboratively. It's really difficult to work on something like this by yourself, and working with a peer, working with a friend is really, really effective. It's also true to how this really gets done in industry. I'm looking forward to working with you on this project. I think that we'll learn a great deal about service experiences. Let's get started.